tutorials I used, and I also included free downloadable templates which you can also find in the description as well, and I numbered all of the template pieces in the order that they appear in this video, so they should be very easy to follow. Alright, well the first thing I did to make this web shooter was build the base using some cereal box cardboard. Once all these pieces were cut out, I stacked them on top of each other and made sure to use a lot of super glue in between each sheet to really cement all these layers together and make it super rigid and durable. And I added this additional piece right here, which will be the top side of the web shooter. To make it even more durable, I thought it would be a good idea to add super glue along the side of all those layers and then sand it smooth. And that is how you make a very strong base for this web shooter. Moving on, I rolled up a small tube of paper to make the barrel of the web shooter, and I measured the outer diameter of this barrel to be about 3/8 of an inch before gluing the tube shut. And we can strengthen this paper tube by adding a layer of super glue. Now I made a tiny ring out of cereal box cardboard and glued that to the end of the barrel like this. Once that dried, I glued that barrel onto the web shooter right here. And here is what it looked like after I gave it a coat of black spray paint. Next, we're going to make a simple locking mechanism out of some popsicle sticks. Now, one of my most frequently asked questions is, how do you cut the popsicle sticks? So here it is for those of you who want to know. It's actually really easy. All you have to do is just kind of score it on each side, and then you can snap it off really easily like this. Now I'm going to attach these two pieces together using duct tape and super glue, and that gap in between the two pieces is going to allow this piece to flex in half, which is what's going to cause the web shooter to shoot when we flex our wrist. So now the locking mechanism is complete, and as you can see, this piece is flexible now. Alright, and now I can glue that locking mechanism onto the web shooter in between that gap right there. So we can set that aside for now and make the bullet of the web shooter, which is of course that thing that's going to shoot out of the web shooter and drag all of that string behind it to make it look like we're shooting web. And here we're going to modify a sewing needle and turn it into a hook so that we can hook our string onto the bullet. So for that I'm just going to use a wire cutter and start by cutting the end off at an angle like this. Then we can cut off the rest of the needle because we don't need that part. All we need is this tiny little piece right here. Basically what we want to do here is glue the long side onto the back of the bullet, but before we can do that, let's just make a hole with a thumbtack right there. And now that the hole is in place, I can easily insert that sewing needle onto the back of the bullet, and what this will do is create a tiny little hook that we can loop the web string onto. Now of course I left a link in the description to this 0.6 by 6 by 50 millimeter spring here, but you can use a pen spring as an alternative. You just won't get very good range. The reason I didn't use pen springs on this web shooter like I did for some of my other web shooters is because in order to keep this web shooter as small and compact as possible, ideally you want a spring that is stronger. That way the length of it when it's fully compressed is as short as possible, as opposed to using like 3 pen springs and ending up needing to make a longer, bigger web shooter to accommodate. Alright, well, where were we? So now I made some Velcro straps for the web shooter to make it wearable, and I used fishing line for this to make the strap as low-key as possible and stay true to that movie-accurate look where the web shooter is basically strapless. Now, I got a little bit ahead of myself here because I should have done this step earlier, but nonetheless, what I did next was add a rubber band to the bottom of the locking mechanism, and that extra bit of tension there is going to help the bullet lock in better. So now we can do a little test to see if this works. So I can insert the bullet into the barrel like this, and to fire I just put pressure on that popsicle stick to flex it downwards. Next, I'm going to make a simple web cartridge, which is basically a tiny little box that's going to store all of the web string before it gets shot out. And that piece belongs right there. But we need to make this piece detachable so that we can actually refill it with string. So to make it detachable, I'm going to use some 5x1mm neodymium magnets. Now these magnets are kind of optional because I can think of a lot of different ways you can make this detachable. It doesn't necessarily need to be neodymium magnets, although they are pretty convenient, but you can use Velcro or even just make it held in by friction. It's really up to you, but this is just the way I did it. Now to complete the look of this web shooter, I'll add the silver stripes and highlights. At this point, it was time to attach fishing line to the trigger to be able to shoot it on command. So basically how this will work is this loop is going to wrap around my finger, and whenever I want to shoot it, I can just tug on that line there and that will release the bullet. For the web string, I decided to use some dental floss, and on the end of that string, I added a small loop using some sewing thread. Now, if you want, you can just loop the end of the dental floss on itself, but the sewing thread is thinner, which will make it easier to reload. To make the reloading process faster, you can make a simple reloading stick that looks like this, and that will allow you to wrap the string around it and then slide all of that string down into the web cartridge. Well hey, if you liked this video, then make sure you click or tap the screen to check out my functional Miles Morales web shooter. Thanks.